That'll hold, and we will welcome the other members. I hope you had a good August recess and thought a lot about me, and
Oh, yeah,
I thought a lot about you.
thank you. Absolutely.
For the members here who may be surprised to have a hearing today, let me mention our thinking. I want to ensure that we continue our oversight responsibilities this fall so that we can better understand the agencies this subcommittee oversees, and so we can discuss what changes have occurred in these agencies under this administration. Today we welcome Gerri Ratliff, the Deputy Director of the Community Relations Service at the Department of Justice, a position she has held since January of 2017. Deputy Director Ratliff has a broad prior federal management experience with the National Science Foundation, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. She also served as counsel to the Deputy Attorney General for Immigration Policy and Special Counsel for the Justice Department's Office of Legislative Affairs. The Community Relations Service, or CRS, has a unique mission within the Justice Department. Rather than being focused on law enforcement or the administration of justice, it fills the gap, the administration of justice, it fills the gap that exists before those roles come into play. CRS is a small part of the Department of Justice, but it has an important role in helping to reduce tension and find common ground when discrimination, violence, or hate crimes occur in our nation's communities. CRS serves as America's peacemaker and acts as a first responder to help rebuild bridges in areas beset by fundamental issues involving civil rights violations. Those efforts range from efforts to reset dialogues between law enforcement and communities after violence, to reacting to hate crimes, to addressing bias in educational systems. Last year alone, CRS mediated in 282 cases across a range of issues at no cost to local communities in order to diffuse tensions and promote solutions. All of this is done with a relatively small budget. In FY 2019, CRS received $15.5 million. The House bill passed in June included an increase of $1.5 million, bringing the agency to a total of $17 million to help the agency address new work in civil rights cold cases. I believe that CRS's work is unique and needed, especially at this time in our nation's history. Unfortunately, this administration does not appear to agree with this assessment. They have recommended essentially eliminating this office in their past two budget requests by trying to bring together CRS within the largest civil rights division, but without proposing an equal increase in funding for that division to accommodate new personnel. Aside from the serious budgetary impacts of that proposal also misconstrues the very different roles that these two parts of DOJ have. The Civil Rights Division has an important role in prosecuting violations of the law, but it is an investigatory body. CRS, on the other hand, is seeking to build trust and propose solutions. I am thankful that this committee, under both Republicans and Democrats, has rejected this proposal. I hope that this hearing will be educational and information for the members here today. I look forward to hearing more about the work that CRS does on behalf of our nation and how a proposed funding increase will strengthen your efforts. I'd like to start by going over some nuts and bolts of how CRS performs. CRS's conciliation specialists provide their assistance on a voluntary basis at the request of officials or community leaders. Could you walk the committee through how such a request come in and how CRS decides which to support?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. First of all, we receive requests from stakeholders for services. We receive referrals from offices like our U.S. Attorney's offices when they see an incident that they think might be appropriate for CRS to look at. And also we proactively identify opportunities to provide services and then can reach out to stakeholders explaining what our mission is and what our programs are, and then working with them if they accept our requests for services. The way we identify which cases to pursue is really based on priority. Every year, there's always going to be more potential cases across the country than any office could address. We also work with communities not just in addressing tensions and conflicts, but communities working to proactively prevent as well as respond to hate crimes. So we are able to prioritize the cases where we think we will have the most impact, where we think there's an opportunity to build community capacity. We're small, and so part of our approach is helping communities develop the capacity independently in the future to assess and resolve their own tensions, to leverage our resources across an even greater spectrum. So our cases come from stakeholders who are interested in our services, where we think we will have the most impact, where there are the greatest tensions, and that's just an evaluation that is carried on at the local level.
But there are cases where you see a need to offer your services and not wait for the folks locally to tell you they need your help?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are able to proactively reach out. If a community has not worked with us previously, we will offer as a matter of outreach to go to them and describe our mission and what our programs and services are. And often they will then over time work with us to decide if any of our range of services might meet their needs. Some communities are already able to address their needs on their own.
Right, because that was the question I had. The engagement usually happens after a hate crime, a police shooting, a conflict at school or public facilities, after the event takes place, unfortunately. So we wanted to know, how do you promote a path to provide proactive support, which is what you started to answer, and if you have any further.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we have quite an array of ways that we do our proactive outreach. When we see that local elected officials have turned over, or new city leaders have been appointed, new community leaders have come to the community, we will proactively contact them to introduce ourselves. It's very important that we have reached out ahead of an incident to develop a relationship and trust. So our conciliators are going throughout their region to establish those relationships and renew and strengthen those relationships. We also have materials on our website. We have conducted webinars to explain our programs, in particular our hate crime forums and protected places of worship programs. We participate in conferences to make presentations about our services, or to have a booth with our brochures and even our annual report to Congress that does describe our services and significant cases. We try to take advantage of any opportunity to do that proactive outreach so that relationships are in place before an incident occurs.
Let me just not dry this subject up, but so when you say proactive, is that you're making yourself available and known to the community in case they need your help. But do you see an area where you read in the paper something that there's something brewing or some accusations have been made, and you step in and say, we can help deal with this?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Part of the conciliator's job is to monitor the news, monitor social media, be aware of public sources of information that would give them evidence of where there may be a growing tension in one of the cities in their jurisdiction, and then they will assess and monitor either off-site by making phone calls, by going on site, to introduce themselves to the relevant stakeholders or to strengthen the relationships that are already in place.
Now, when CRS takes on a role as a mediator, does it reduce the likelihood that litigation might otherwise be pursued?
Mr. Chairman, we hope so. There have been cases that we have successfully concluded a mediation agreement, and then there was not litigation, and so we would like to say that our work was a part of that reason to avoid the litigation.
Yeah, let me just, we're aware that CRS provides its services in a discreet manner that reduces the potential for misunderstanding and avoids unnecessary publicity that might interfere with confidence building and communications. How do you reconcile this with the potential benefits of publicizing CRS contributions to reducing conflict in communities, positive advertising, if you will?
Mr. Chairman, we do take advantage of, as in your words, positive advertising in a way that does not reveal confidential details of our cases. For example, in our annual report, we do get waivers from parties before we divulge any details at all, even at a high level, about our cases. When we provide outreach, we do include relevant case summaries where we've been given permission from the parties and do not reveal details that would identify the particular parties involved, and certainly not specific conversations that occurred. But there is a lot that we can do and that we do to try to get the word out about the kinds of cases that we work on, the programs and trainings we offer. Certainly we can discuss and hand out our brochures and, as I mentioned, our webinars to talk about their services without stepping over the line of confidentiality.
Thank you. I have to say that if, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, if we were grading you on being a loyal soldier, you would have done very well today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But did you almost say Mr. President? No, I mean, would have been a slip. But we've been around long enough to understand in all administrations what role the White House plays in the budget. And it's clear to this subcommittee on this side, and I venture to say that the other side knows it too, that they're trying to get rid of your agency, and that's why they're trying to put it somewhere else. And you answer the questions the way you were supposed to, but please understand that the people who gave you more money in the budget last time was this subcommittee in a bipartisan fashion. It was not the intention of the administration to do that. It was their intention to move you and push you out. And we've seen that in many places. The 2020 request proposed moving CRS functions within the Civil Rights Division. As you know, the House passed Appropriations bill did not support this action. In part, this reflected the view that CRS's mission needs to be expanded, not shrunk, but also that CRS not having a law enforcement or prosecution function does not seem a good fit for the Civil Rights Division, which is expected to carry out those functions and to do so with vigor. What relationship does CRS have with the Civil Rights Division and with other DOJ enforcement agencies, such as the FBI, who investigate crimes such as hate crimes and discrimination? Can you work together, or must you be strictly separated so as to keep your credibility as a peacemaker and not a score settler?
Mr. Chairman.
Because we do, by the way, we do see your unique mission, or the way the agency has developed it, where you go in and you try to make peace, whereas we expect other agencies to go in and grab somebody by the neck or by the arm and say, why did you do that? You know, you can't do that. So how do you answer that question now?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. We do leverage department resources where appropriate, as I mentioned earlier. That is mostly on department-level programmatic initiatives, such as working together to implement the hate crimes website, community-facing hate crimes training. We do not share confidential details of our cases with other components of the Justice Department. We do at times have appropriate case to coordinate with, for example, as I mentioned before, the COPS office, when we are both working to facilitate dialogue between local law enforcement community groups or between law enforcement groups. Those would be cases where we are certainly not divulging any confidential information. We work with the Civil Rights Division, never in detail on cases, but for example, if they call us in to support, for example, the announcement of a prosecutorial declination, then we would work with them to support the needs of the community and understanding the basis for that decision and working to reduce the potential for violence. But we would rather fall on our swords than divulge confidential information to any inappropriate source.
So you do work with these agencies, but there's still information that you don't give them or pass on to them because you need that information in order to build your trust in the community. Is that it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we could not do our work. We would have no trust if we were not able to keep our information confidential.
Thank you. The CRS Northeastern Regional Office, based in Manhattan, handles CRS's work in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. In 2017, for example, school officials in Ato Rey, Puerto Rico, requested CRS services to help address community concerns about disparate treatment based on race and color. How does CRS follow issues in Puerto Rico from such a distance? Is it all done with a team flown from New York?
Congressman, the work in Puerto Rico is very important to us. We had 6 cases in Puerto Rico in FY18. Not only did we have staff volunteer to deploy in support of FEMA for the hurricane recovery efforts, but we also have staff dedicated to the needs that relate to our jurisdiction in Puerto Rico. For example, most of those cases in FY18 had to do with perceptions of disparate access to resources relating to the hurricane recovery. Those were cases where we were able to work with FEMA and the local stakeholders to share information and ensure that access to recovery resources was as fair and equitable as possible. In addition, the schools in Puerto Rico have asked us to come back when they, not this year, but as soon as they feel ready, to work with them to address school-based tensions, and we look forward to doing that work.
So a lot of your work was with FEMA and agencies as such and trying to find out how they were treating Puerto Rico. I mean, we heard about it, we saw it in many cases, but it was hard at times to prove that they were not getting the same fair treatment that they should have been getting and that other people got.
Mr. Chairman, in addition, there are often perceptions of disparate access in a chaotic environment, and which is it's just as damaging as actual disparate impact as well. And we work on both categories to try to mitigate those impacts.
Deploying CRS personnel so far away must entail a significant commitment of personnel for a length of time. How does the Northeastern Regional Office ensure it has the capacity to meet demand for its services?
Mr. Chairman, our conciliators and regional directors coordinate among themselves to ensure that we are meeting the highest needs. So if there is a case in New York that one of our 2 conciliators who are located there can't get to because they are meeting other needs within the region, we will, through headquarters, coordinate with the other regions to identify staff to deploy to the region. Our interregional deployments are a tool we use to ensure that we are meeting the highest needs where we can have the biggest impact.
Going back to FEMA for a second, your 2018 report described the positive role that CRS conciliation specialists served in facilitating FEMA operations in Puerto Rico, particularly with disadvantaged communities suffering from hurricanes Irma and Maria. Would you describe that effort as having a lasting impact on FEMA community relations? Is the experience transferable to other government community areas of potential conflict, you think?
Mr. Chairman, yes, absolutely. FEMA showered our staff with praises for the work they did on those deployments, and we do believe there are lessons learned from that activity that we can use elsewhere.
Thank you. The CRS website notes that 90% of hate crimes are violent and that about 48% of all hate crimes are motivated by racial bias. Yet your website also notes that less than half of all hate crimes are reported to law enforcement. In our hearing this year with the head of the Civil Rights Division, we discussed the largest barriers to combating hate crimes was under-identification and under-reporting. Last year, the department set up a hate crimes website. How is CRS helping communities become more aware of the prevalence of such crime and to improve such reporting? Is the website increasing awareness of DOJ CRS resources? And secondly, the website only seems to contain resources in English. Given that victims of hate crimes do not always speak English as a first language, what can we do or what are we thinking of doing to deal with that particular issue?
Mr. Chairman, that was a lot of questions. I will try to answer all of them, and if I leave one out, please remind me. I'll start with the hate crimes website. There have been over 100,000 visitors to the website since it was launched last year across all 50 states. That is one way. We are hoping that awareness is getting out. The website was launched as a phase 1 with plans to enhance it as we move forward. So I take your point that it would be more effective to offer resources in other languages, and I will take that back to the planners. Reporting hate crimes is often a function of trust. CRS focuses many of our programs on setting up opportunities for communities who might not feel trust to network and get to know local law enforcement so that those relationships are in place and hopefully there will be trust to facilitate reporting. We also have 2 educational forums, the Hate Crimes Forum and the Protecting Places of Worship Forum, that include panels of federal and local law officials. Often an assistant U.S. attorney or the U.S. attorney even will attend to talk to the participants, and these would be community members, about what is the federal hate crime law? Is there a state hate crime law? How do you report? What are victim services? Those are forums that we have conducted throughout the country. Even just this fiscal year, we've conducted 9 hate crime forums and 14 Protecting Places of Worship forums. We have just completed guides for how to put on those forums. They're really an A to Z guide for if a community even wants to put on a forum without us or even with our help, as a form of capacity building, guides that we will be handing out and making available on our website so that any community who wants to put on such kinds of educational sessions can do so.
I have one last question. One of the bigger issues in the country has been for a while now, but certainly recently more than before, it's the relationship between the police and the community. And there's so much work that needs to be done there to create a better situation. And many communities are trying to do that. There has to be law enforcement within law enforcement to deal with discrimination cases. There has to be programs of understanding and coming together. How does your agency deal with that? And what resources are available at DOJ and in your office to reach out to communities on this particular issue?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. As I described with the Erie, Pennsylvania example, one of our programs that we developed last year is called Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships, or SBCP. It is a program that is customized for some of the scenarios you've described. When there are historical tensions or a recent incident between police and community groups, and the police, often there's a new police chief who is willing to sort of try to make a fresh start with the community. We will set up a day-long session, and these are planned not in a vacuum, not just with the police chief, but with a planning group that includes the key community members. So there is buy-in and credibility in the session to sit the parties down, to talk through what are their perceptions of what works and what doesn't in the city, and then what do they think could be done for improvement. We do not come in and impose solutions. If solutions are not generated locally based on their understanding of what would work, it cannot be successful. So we are behind the scenes facilitating those discussions, and then we set up a council that will take the solutions that have been identified, we put it in a report, and then they meet on their own cadence to implement the solutions that the community and the law enforcement identified. So this is not just a one day and it's solved session. This is a day session that then lives on through this council that's comprised of law enforcement as well as community groups who then implement solutions that they think will address the issues that were raised. That is one of the scenario you described. We also have a similar program called the City Spirit, where if the police issues are just part of a larger range of challenges, we can do a similar facilitated dialogue session that is not just focused on the police in the community, but other city officials. And we also have community dialogues tailored to race and other jurisdictional issues to enable community groups to come together, express their perceptions, and hopefully build relationships and trust to improve those relationships over time.
Well, I appreciate that. There's so much that needs to be done in that area, and it's not an easy one at times, but one where there are a lot of people who want the situation to be better. There's trust in their local police, that there's support for the local police, but that the local police also respect and understand and not bring any of their personal feelings they may have growing up or something into their job. So it's a very difficult situation, but one that we must deal with and must resolve. Without a community that has a relationship between the police and the community, it just won't work for either side. So thank you. Mr. Adderhold?
Oh, Chairman, I don't have anything else.
Mr. Cartwright?
No more questions.
Well, we thank you. You're probably glad to hear the last three comments, We thank you for the work you're doing. We hope you understand that our comments are not meant to be critical, but rather we have certain beliefs, and we also understand that you can't get up here and agree with us on why you're not getting more resources and more support and so on. And it's all part of what we're dealing with in this country, trying to deal with a lot of things. But I personally, from my personal viewpoint and a prerogative I always take on my birthplace. Do appreciate the fact that you pay attention to the territories, Puerto Rico and the others. If I accomplish one thing in Congress, it's that little by little it's beginning to change the language. It always was the 50 states. And now you hear a lot of chairmen of committee and ranking members say the 50 states and the territories, because we're one family, and a lot of people seem to forget that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity.